All right, we might kick this off, everyone. We appreciate you waiting and we appreciate everyone coming tonight, making the journey out here to Riverside. Hopefully you found some time to inspect some of the mares going through the chairman's sale tomorrow evening and also here at the Broodmare sale on Friday. We have 3 segments to get through tonight about broodmares, basically, and we do have room for questions, but if you could hold your questions to the end of the 3 segments, because your question may be answered, obviously, as we go along. We do have a Lucky Door prize which will be drawn at the end of the proceedings, and we will try to keep this to an hour. James Bester may push the envelope a little bit, but an hour is the time limit we've been given. All right, we might kick this off. I'm just going to introduce the panel. My name's Jemma. I work at Inglis in the marketing team. Beside me is our senior bloodstock consultant, Will Stott, who's based in Victoria. Beside him is the effervescent Damon Gabbedy, who's been good enough to join us this evening, who's a Belmont bloodstock. He's a bloodstock agent, advises on lots of matings, don't you, Damon, throughout the year, and buys at every sale. You've had some success in the past few weeks. We obviously know V8, Group 1 winner, and you advised on the breeding of Miss Hufflepuff, or Coco's son, who won the Group 1 on Saturday. Congratulations. Next to him is Chris Phillips, who's an esteemed vet and had 7 years working at Waikato Stud, worked all over the world. You've been a successful breeder in your own right. Obviously, Chris, Cucaracha winning the Queensland Derby, and you bring vast amounts of experience. You've worked at Rosedale and Partners in the UK as well. So we have lots of questions for you, especially at the end, being a vet. Next to him, Griffin. Joe and Greg Griffin run a wonderful stud, Lime Country Thoroughbreds, which originated in New Zealand. Joe and Greg have worked all over the world as well. Came to Australia in 2017, set up in the Southern Highlands, and have since moved to Upper Scone in Blandford. They've set up a farm there, and you've been in the top 10 vendor by average across the major yearling and breeding stock sales for the past few years. Notable highlights being 3 individual $1 million lots at the Inglis Easter sale last year, and obviously you sold Norzita as well on behalf of Think Big Stud for $1.7 million at Chairman's in 2019. Next to Joe, James Bester. You may all know his dulcet tones. James, I don't know where to start with your career. I'm just going to give a couple of hit points, see if I'm right. You were a steward in Cape Town in South Africa at one point. You worked very closely with Robert Sangster, who set you up on a path to where you are now. You've worked with Arrowfield. You've worked, obviously, with Coolmore for a long time. You've been a successful breeder. You've advised on many matings. Hips Don't Lie is a mare I know that has been a very successful mare for you and your wife as well. You purchased her. She's a Group 2 winner.
She had nothing to do with my wife. I purchased my wife.
She's been here at the sale enjoying some wonderful results out of Hips Don't Lie over the years at Easter. She's just been an absolute darling for you, I know, and learning to fly descends from her, and she's been a wonderful broodmare. Look, we could go on about your career, but we do look forward to hearing from all of you this evening. We're going to kick it off, Will, with our first segment, which is selecting a broodmare.
So, Damon, I'm going to hand to you. When the Chairman's and Australian Broodmare catalogue comes out, how do you refine your search? What do you look for? I know your assistant Lauren does a lot of research for you. Can you tell us about that?
Thank you, Will, and thank you for having me. I feel like I'm on a game show panel here. So when the catalogue comes out, for me it comes down to, you have various clients, and so it comes down to budget as well. So you want to pick the horses for the clients that'll fit into their budget, basically, because the worst thing you can do is go to a sale and recommend these horses and get blown away. Look, most clients come to the sales wanting to buy a horse, so you want to pick in their budget and criteria, and then through that you have certain criteria you want to look for. And you have a wish list as well, and every breeder and client has a wish list because they hope something slips through the system, which invariably it doesn't. But
so on that sort of pre-sale, what sort of research do you do?
Well, through the Arian websites and things, you can look up what the mare cost as a yearling, what every progeny has made, how many race starts she had, what a rating was, if they were sold as a weanling to a yearling, and all that information is vitally important. Information is power and knowledge. The more you can learn and research, the better decision you'll make.
Chris, what is more important when weighing up selecting a broodmare or a race filly? Pedigree or physique? Do you worry about leg conformation? What can you live with? What can't you live with?
Echoing, and thank you for having me here tonight. Echoing on Damon's sort of points, I think the first part is to decide what you're buying the horse for. If it's a quick trade, if the mare's had some history that lets you know that a fault that she has in herself is not being passed on to her offspring, then I tend to be more forgiving, and I would be more of the ilk to be buying an older mare, probably from where I've come from and spending my own money. That's the sort of area that you end up falling into, and as a consequence, I forgive a lot more than I think you would do if you're paying more money. You have to. So yeah, I would say probably confirmation is very important in this part of the world if you're reselling. Pedigree probably secondary, only because when you're starting out buying horses, you can't usually afford to, spend the big bucks on the big pedigrees. So trying to produce a nice type that will meet the market, I think, is very important.
Joe, yourself, pedigree or confirmation? Sorry to interrupt you, Will, but on the screen there we have Atlantic Jewel, which we'll get to you, James, about it. But as a broodmare or a race filly off the track, I guess it depends if you're buying for yourself or a client as well.
So pedigree or type, I think at the end of the day we have to firstly get the horse out of the box for someone, and they're deciding whether or not they're getting it out of the box based on pedigree. But we can't sell a goat, so it has to be a good type. And for me, our buyers go in swings of turns of what's in fashion for what they can and can't live with. And I think very much at the moment, the market is red hot on a hind leg. And a wily Irishman did say to me, Joe, we can fix a lot in a front leg, we cannot fix a back leg.
James, up on the screen, we've got a photo of Atlantic Jewel when you purchased her. Obviously, there's not a lot of black type in the top of the pedigree, but tell us about the physique and what you fell in love with and how that pedigree's grown over the years.
Yeah, as a yearling, she presented like that on the page, and there was nothing to look at. Global Glamour was similar too. However, the quality, the head of that filly, she wasn't a particularly powerful sprinting type, but leggy, high quality, a lot of Zabeel about her, and we loved the way she walked. So I and Coolmore got together, unfortunately for the vendor, because each of us was going to give 500,000 for her. We combined, so I for Laurie Macri and Demi O'Byrne for John Magna, and we got her for 400,000. But yeah, that kind of quality and the way she moved, and then of course Fastnet Rock on Zabeel. The pedigree page looks very different now. Subsequent to that, a lot of things happened in the pedigree, and she herself became the broodmare, the dam of a Group 1 winner, and Fastnet Rock has become the probably best broodmare sire in Australasia at the moment.
But also, when you bought her, she might have lacked pedigree, but she was out of a winning mare by champion broodmare sire Zabeel. She was by a champion sire out of a champion broodmare sire, so I wouldn't say she just had not much pedigree.
And a cross.
That's a good point. The sire and the broodmare sire account for 75% of the chromosomes. We get fixated on that bottom line because that's what we see on the page, but 50% to the sire, 25% Zabeel, you're already off to a winning start. Actually, in her case, an interesting point was we got phoned by Lloyd Williams after buying her, who said he owned the dam. He owned very few fillies in the latter years, but Regard was one of them. And he said she was the best horse in their yard, better than Efficient in the year that, from the same crop, and he won a Derby and a Melbourne Cup. But she broke down. And Danny Nikolic confirmed that. We knew none of that when we bought her, but it is interesting that what appears on the page is not always what's there, because she was a very high class, definitely black type filly, which didn't show on the page to our advantage.
And she's obviously then thrown it and built the pedigree.
Yeah.
Joe, there's been a big shift over the last few years to the Inglis digital platform or online platform. Last year, Inglis sold over 3,000 fillies and mares online. How do you go about purchasing mares, doing your homework, to finding mares online compared to at a live sale?
I'm a sucker for a live sale. I think the weanling sale is the Irishman's crack, and the broodmare sale is mine. I love a live sale for mares. So online sales, we're lucky enough to live in the Hunter, and a lot of the stock is offered there. Sydney's not far away. I think relationships with trainers, obviously more and more being sold online. It's very hard for us to get two broodmare sales together to do both broodmare sales now. We've ended up bringing all of our stock this year to Inglis. It's on our doorstep. It's right here. So even with online sales, I love that we have so much information. Chris, I know you're an avid, we've sat and had glasses of wine and watched mares go through before. And look, I've bid for expensive weanlings online and very expensive mares. So both platforms are.
But I would say for online, the most important thing would be due diligence. Not enough people do enough due diligence to either go look at the mare or do enough research to know what they're buying, and that's the most important thing.
Absolutely, and that's how it's structured with the 5 days, is that if you can't see it, you can send someone else out and do your homework.
I think on that note, get in touch with an agent if you are at home bidding, because most of the agents know the families. The trainers are only giving you the information they've got, and it might be a small owner of a horse selling it, but everybody knows these families. You could ring the likes of Damon or, a number of agents here and
James.
go... James, sorry, I keep forgetting.
James has got a 1-800 number.
The knowledge is all there. You just need to pick up the phone. Yeah.
How big of a factor is age? We hear a lot about age, and we know a lot of times at the yearling sales, people aren't fans sometimes of buying yearlings out of older mares. We've had great success, obviously, with Chatelaine was a 19-year-old when she foaled Marzu, who went on to be Group 1 winner. Joe, a client of yours, bought Ultimate Fever as a 19-year-old and foaled a Flying Artie, and there was a great success story for your client out of that, if you want to tell the crowd about it.
Yeah, look, I read a really great quote recently that age doesn't know about potential. Retirement knows nothing about potential. So we've done very well ourselves buying older mares, piece of cake. We bought as a 14-year-old mare for $8,000 who we believed in, and she threw 2 stakes winners after we purchased her. Granita threw a Group 1 placed horse, you'll remember, in Chris, in New Zealand. 13 years old, I think we paid about $14,000 for her. This mare, I think if you believe in the matings a mare has had already, and they've been mated well, and potentially delivered stock, even by average sires, and I'll go back to James here, say with Samana, with a mare we purchased last year.
I thought you meant I was an average sire.
I hear you go, all right.
Let's keep this PC, please.
But even, for example, we purchased Festivity as a 13-year-old mare last year, and James purchased a winning Rupert out of her, and we liked that this older mare had thrown stock that had sold for a lot more money. And I think Ultimate Fever, obviously a mare at 19 or so who had delivered stakes winner after stakes winner, was in foal to a champion sire. It's a cross that works, and the market wants proven.
And the yearling sold for $1.6 million at the Inglis Easter sale by Schnitzel. So
I actually tried to buy the mare when Joe's client bought the mare. So I was a big fan of her and her age. I think there is medical reasons behind not buying an older mare. There is definitely a higher risk of reduced fertility, so that has to be of known fact when you purchase an older mare. But some of these mares are 25% stakes winners to runners, and we're looking at them as that's a bad thing because they're on their 8th or 9th foal. And I did a little bit of research before we came here, and Tula Vida 12th foal, I Wish I Win 7th foal, Red Self 13th foal. See the Stars 10th foal. Like, these are some breed-shaping stallions here and groundbreaking Group 1 winning horses that are out of older mares. So my preference is don't anyone look at the older mares because I want to buy them.
That's perspective, yeah.
But you should definitely not,
Discount them.
Discount
Yeah,
them,
and don't
absolutely.
forget, Secretariat's mother was over 20. Mill Reef's mother was over 20. Those are probably the greatest American and European racehorses of all time. I mean, with humans, I like to ship out my wives and girlfriends as soon as they pass childbearing age. But with horses, give them a chance, I think.
Can I be devil's advocate? Are they the exception bar the rule, the old mares?
Go for
You
it.
personally, James?
No,
Broodmare?
look, obviously, in general, as Chris said, the fertility factor has to be brought into account. But, yeah, don't dismiss an old mare.
How do we feel as we're looking at old mares and probably have all purchased one? Personally, from a farming perspective, if we're buying an older mare, I like her to look younger than her years.
I don't think anyone wants to look at a mare that looks older than what she actually is. I don't know that scientifically there's any merits or advantages or disadvantages to that. But I do know, I was doing some reading this morning, and I know Damon's criticised me about some of the research I've done for this, but I wanted to make it informative, and a recent publication has just shown that it's not necessarily the age at which the mare is bred. So if she's bred as a 3-year-old, 10 foals later, she's still a 13-year-old, but actually it's those last foals that aren't as successful statistically. If she's bred as a 7-year-old, it's her 17th foal that is not as successful statistically. So it's not actually when the mare starts breeding, it's the amount of foals that she has during that time. I personally find that I look at a mare that's slipped or has maybe had a dead foal. That counts for me. That's one of the breeding opportunities that mare had in her lifetime. So even though it might say that she's only had 7 or 8 live foals, I would count if she had 2 slips that she's on her 9th or her 10th. And reproductively, her body is letting her know that is the case, and maybe that's the reason why you might have some of these mares that look like they've only had 5 foals on page, but actually look like they've had 10, because you do the research and genetically or physiologically they've actually had 10 chances to get in foal.
I think it's just on that though, from a sales perspective, you can, I don't want to say get away with, but you're also selling a mare that's only had 5 foals. The trainer or the buyer at the other end isn't looking at that, and potentially with an older mare, they don't necessarily always look at the age of the mare, they look at what foal is this of the mare, and sometimes there's value there when you're buying as well.
Definitely.
So, sorry, Joe, when Imperial Force was born, does he look like a big, strong, $1 million Easter yearling, or...?
He was a brute from birth, and the mare is retired at the farm now. She's big and round and looks younger even now than at that time. Wow.
Damon, we'll give you a chance to talk about a successful broodmare purchase. From the chairman's sale, $625,000 for Miss Interior's later producing Home Affairs. What was it that drew you to that mare?
Well, at the time, I was doing some work with Torrey Burn Stott and Brett and John Cornish. She was by Flying Spur, who was the champion broodmare sire of the time, and she was a half-sister to Russian Revolution, who had won the Galaxy a couple of weeks before, and it was from the great pedigree of Fran Frelouche, which is responsible for Encosta de Lago and Flying Spur, and just an amazing depth of pedigree. So it was a pedigree on the up, and they were wanting to get into a young current family by a champion broodmare sire, winning mare and in foal to a young sire, which was Deep Field at the time. So she just, had a lot of ticks that we were attracted to.
So, Damon, obviously you help a lot of clients do their matings and advise when to sell or keep mares. Obviously, Coco's son won the Group 1 on the weekend, and that would have been a hard decision for Linda from Tyrrell to take Miss Hufflepuff out of the sale, considering she could have made a lot of money. She's obviously selling Pinocchio. How was that decision made?
Well, Pinocchio has been an amazing mare for Tyrrell, but the most important thing in the sale of Pinocchio is she's got 2 daughters of her that she's retained, a Piero filly and a I'm Invincible filly. So I feel when the mare gets a bit older, and if you've got 2 daughters, you're in a great position to have a bet each way. You can sell the mare while she still holds some good value, And if she keeps producing, like Joe and James are alluding to, you've still got the half-sisters to cash in on. So, and it's, farms like Tyrrell and many farms amongst us, they haven't got oil wells behind them. They have to balance the books and sell things to buy new things. So if they can sell Pinocchio with having 2 daughters and buy a couple of other younger mares, that's what they've decided to do.
And obviously hope for a daughter out of Miss Hufflepuff.
Absolutely. They've got no daughters of Miss Hufflepuff. She's in foal to the Autumn Sun, who's flying, and they just felt if they sold her, they'd take an Autumn Sun yearling out of their future draft in 2 or 3 years' time, and it's not a great, having a dam of a Group 1 winner in your broodmare band is fantastic, so it's not the right time to sell her yet.
How important is first dam activity? You hear people say it skips a generation. When you look at a page, James, hips don't lie. We'll have a look at the research doc for that one. This is Ennis Hill, rather, but how much is first dam activity important when you're selecting a broodmare or race filly?
Yeah, it's very important. So every single filly in that first dam and second dam of Hips Don't Lie is being bred to the best stallions in Australia. If you have a bunch of fillies as opposed to a bunch of colts and geldings there, whatever the black type is, there's a better chance that the pedigree will expand. So let's say I was looking at the pedigree of Tuta Levita here. There's a number of siblings that have been bred last year to the likes of I Am Invincible and Zoostar and Snitzel and all the leading stallions.
And if you have a chairman's catalogue, she's lot 87 in front of you if you want to look at that to compare and see what James is talking about.
So although she's already got a Group 1 winning sibling, there's a chance for that first dam to expand. That happened very much in Hips Don't Lie's case. When we bought her, there was nothing on the page. She was just a lovely quality, good walking filly. Turned out a good race filly, and then, of course, it all expanded from there.
Just on that note as well, if people are looking at young mares of families, Greg and I purchased, when we had very little money, and we purchased a Volksrad filly out of Book Run at Karaka for $21,000. But we'd done our homework, and there were half-sisters at Cambridge Stud, Trelawney, Waikato, I can't remember the 4th farm, and we'd figured out by the time this yearling was 5 years old going to stud, she was going to have 35 close relatives that would have bred for us by people far, far richer than us. And sure enough, she went on to win a Group 2 and some other races and did very well. And we leased her out to race. We couldn't afford to race that filly at the time. But she had 5 more black type close relatives that were all group winners by the time that mare was 4. So I think if you can look, as you're looking around for some value, maybe look for a mare that's being mated well by people with potentially more money than you, that we can get what we call a free ride with.
Sonic Boom, just wanted to bring this one up, purchased as a yearling. It's going through the chairman's cell, James. What are the features as a yearling? But obviously, as a broodmare, you think, hopefully, this is a mare that could make it.
Well, she's very good looking and looked like a 2-year-old. She was out of a fast net rock mare, which is a huge thing. I had previously bought her half-brother Laver Rod as a weanling, actually, and sold it here at Inglis, and he's very good. But the hind quarter, the head, the walk on this filly, all appealed. She looked like a 2-year-old and came out on debut and won the Group 3 Blue Diamond Preview. Being by Spirit of Boom, obviously she can be mated to a wide range of stallions, but there's the backup of the fast net rock close up there. So yeah, that was the idea, and I am loath to let her go.
Joe, your Broodmare Fund has had plenty of success in recent years, including Tell Your Mama, and there's going to be a pedigree up on the screen. Tell us about the Broodmare Fund and what's involved.
Poor little Kiwis that we are. Basically, we've ended up, and we did this in New Zealand as well, including those mares that I talked about earlier for $8,000 and $12,000. So just for us, by bringing partners in of the farm that have stock with us, And people we like, know and trust, we are able to buy more mares to hopefully give us a leg up faster. And look, we've done very well, but it's a lot of homework. Sometimes a lot of favours burned when we go and ask people if they can just let us have that one. Maybe it goes to their farm, and it's been very good for us. And look, I'm very open in telling people our retirement fund is hopefully 5 mares that we can pull 100,000 a year clear and off, and we can have a very nice $500,000 a year retirement fund, which if you get there and stick to your game is very achievable in this game.
I think that brings us to the end of selecting a broodmare. We'll try and keep this moving along. Does anyone have any questions for the panel, aside from Narelle in the front row, about selecting a broodmare? So what are the things that make you go, absolutely no, I can't select that broodmare?
I have views on that. Handsome is as handsome does, and that's why it's so important, if you're considering a mare and you've done your homework before this sale, go to the farm and have a look at her previous foal. Very important, because you get some mares that you may think are not your ideal, but they throw much better than they are. They throw bigger than they are. They throw better walkers, whatever.
Can you look at the yearling videos from previous sales if you don't have the opportunity to go to a farm? 'Cause
Indeed.
now everything's filmed.
You can do that, but that won't apply to, let's say, the most recent weanling. And people like Coolmore taught me that. They wouldn't consider a mare without going to the farm, making sure that the foal it's thrown previously is the real deal.
If they're a maiden mare, and I would think temperament.
Then you use your imagination.
But I would think temperament is important, because you want a mare to breed a good temperament yearling, because if the yearling paraded in front of you is going,
Yeah, sure.
trainers hate it.
And I would say, Ziva, too, that you see something in front of you, but she's in foal to something. And if you say, well, I can see that they've mated her to a stallion to add a bit of leg, add a bit of scope, put a better head in than the mare herself has, you've got to use a little imagination that way and imagine your product.
I think we all have pet things that we cannot live with. Excuse the Kiwi accent there, that was pet, P-E-T. And I think all 4 of us would have different things that we're just like, that's a no for us. And that's always through previous experience. And one of the things, while we have always so many foals born on farm, as you would, Chris. We've had so many yearlings through a draft, and we know how they grow out. But once again, I would probably go back to an agent who has looked at so much stock through a family of a period. That will give you a good idea on that family.
I think Damon's point about temperament is a must for people that are early in the breeding game. Stressful mares can leave stressful foals and can cause accidents. And so one of the biggest things that I don't like seeing is a stressed mare. You've got a foal that runs through a fence, or you've got an orthopedic issue waiting to happen with a mare that
Is a box walker,
or is
smash your foal around.
Thinks of herself over her progeny. So I do think for anyone that is new into the breeding game, finding a mare that's got good temperament is right up there if you want.
Or a woman.
I was going to say I would not be a good selection at a broodmare.
Or a
sale
man, if we look at the
Excuse me.
panel.
I'd be one you put the pen through. We're just going to move on to mating a broodmare. The breeding season obviously is not far away. We're at the end of the sales season now. We're at the mare sales. People are starting to make their matings for the new season. Stallion fees are being set. Let's have a look at a photo comparison up here. We've got Extreme Choice and Fastnet Rock. It again relates to conformation or pedigree, and I think it's good even with maiden mares, which you brought up, Damon. How important is it to match the two? I mean, James, I heard you describe Fastnet Rock as having a head like a boat at a stallion parade at Coolmore one year. and I think it was meant to be as a little bit of a compliment to him, but how important is it to match the mare, or what do you take into account?
Aidan O'Brien said to John Magner about Fastnet Rock, it's a long head, John. It's not a bad head, right? It takes a bit of a deviation halfway down the head. It's good up between the eyes and around the jowl, and then there is it jutting out. He's out of a mare by Royal Academy, who throws beautiful heads, and half the Fastnet Rock fillies come out with beautiful heads, and some don't. So again, you don't always get, you know, you could breed a mare to Fastnet Rock and get a beautiful head or not.
But they're two different sizes. If you've got a smaller mare that's going to start, and we'll talk about foal, the first foals, maiden foals are this, talking about the smaller foal is usually the first one. How much is that impacted, do you think, by the size of the stallion?
Well, I think you have to try and complement the failures. So if you have a short-legged mare, you breed a leggy stallion. But for a first foal, yes, try and breed a bigger stallion, you know. However, I would say, but Chris would know more about this than I would, but I think foal size is to some extent determined by uterine size. So a first foal is living in a little more confined space, and then once the mare has onto her second and third foals, it's roomier.
That is the truth. Absolutely, there's some evidence to suggest that the maturation of the uterus helps with placental growth and fetal growth. So that is absolutely true. I think when you're buying a maiden, personally, I like to see a mare, if she's small, with at least a big enough barrel to be able to cope with a pregnancy. And it's a little bit of a lottery. I know we're talking about first foals a bit later, but of what you're really going to get. But mating-wise, I agree. I think trying to eradicate as many faults as possible with the mare that you've got in front of you, but also, you know, size comparisons, you know, breeding a small mare to a big stallion doesn't always leave you with a good foal. So I think ultimately breed the one you want, not the one that you're trying to be too clever to come out with the foal that should be the mix of the both.
On paper should make sense.
Totally.
Yep.
Just on that point as well, I think bone. So you might go to a leggy stallion, but if he doesn't have the bone particularly below the knee, and you're going to a maiden mare that's a little bit lighter of bone, be careful of that. You could potentially go to a smaller stallion who has plenty of bone and get something that is around the mare size anyway.
Damon, when selecting a stallion, do you have a short, medium or long-term plan? Say a young mare, do you send her to a proven stallion or a first season stallion?
Look, I think in an ideal world, young maiden mares should go to proven stallions, because the most important thing for breeders is to breed winners, and that will make your mare. You know, and you can send a young, well-credentialed mare to first season sires for their first 4 or 5 years, and she might breed no winners.
Or the fashion changes if you're breeding to sell. Yeah.
And let's face it, most first season sires are failures. So we've got to get our mares off and running. So you can set your mare up. You might take a hit in the early days, but if you can breed winners, you're going to be rewarded in the long term.
What happens if budget constraints?
Budget constraints play a huge part.
Just on that, proven stallions, you might think you need to spend a lot of money, and just because we just had the Spirit of Boom mare up here, that's a proven stallion for not a lot of money, that has bone, substance, throws winners, although it was a risky call. I thought the Fastnet Rock and the Spirit of Boom heads coming through, but that you don't always have to pay a lot.
I didn't breed it, I bought it.
No, and it actually worked out okay.
It was risky for them when they bred it, yeah.
You can breed to proven stallions like in the old days. Choisir was a great example. There was a $30,000-$40,000 proven stallion
Star Spangled
who
Mount.
wasn't
Mans.
the most highly commercial, but they got runners and winners and stakes horses.
Nicks and crosses. I think we were speaking about Galileo and Danehill, all those crosses, more than ready. Husson.
Justify and Fastnet Rock.
Yes, there's another one.
Have I got a mare for you?
Up here is a good example of Fastnet Rock and Galileo crosses as stakes winners. How much, when considering matings, do you use these I guess, pedigree software analysis or Arian to go and look at the proven history of a cross?
I do. I spend my life on Arian doing nicks and crosses, and I think it's really important to try to, hone in on them. So I think it's very important.
Yeah, I agree. It's important. I think it just depends what you bought your mare for. If you're a 50-grand purchase and you want to trade a yearling out of it and then get it back in foal, you might not have the luxury of being able to really do that. But I appreciate when you're at the breeding end of the market that you want to breed racehorses, and we should all be trying to do that, obviously, even when we're trading horses, but ultimately some of us, we don't always have the luxury to do that. So I think nicks are important, but I think trying to have a complement with something that you can sell and afford would also
And
be
drill for oil where oil has been found.
True. But I also think just be very aware if you're using online packages, because it will send a half sister to a half brother, because it only looks at half of the pedigree page. So do not be sucked in by just punching in your mare and the sire. Have a look at the pedigree.
Damon, you've booked a lot of clients' mares. What is your most satisfying mating?
Last weekend, speaking recently with Tyrell, who I do the pedigree help with, we mated their mare Miss Hufflepuff to the Autumn Sun, and came out with a Group 1 winner. So it was.
And Magic Time's another one up there.
Yeah, Magic Time was a mare I bought for John Muir for Milburn Creek, and her first foal's Magic Time. So I'd say right now, Coco Sun.
Portrait of a Lady, Chris, your time to shine. Cucaracha. I think we're going to put her pedigree with the sales results up on screen here. What was it about her that you were attracted to when you looked at her at the sale?
Yeah. Well, I'd recently, actually just that year, had some success with another mare I'd bought a couple of years earlier that was for relatively cheap money, but by a good stallion and more than ready, and she'd left, or was just about to leave the Singapore Derby winner, and I wanted to shop in that budget again. A lot of us don't have big budgets to spend, and I see a lot of young people in the audience that might want to get into the breeding game, and I want to implore that you can make money out of 40, 50, 60 grand horses, with your mates on your own. This mare I bought for 40,000. She wasn't beautiful in front, and I heavily rely on research in order to decide what I'm going to buy. Dali, it's quite tricky because not much comes up for sale, but luckily they're very open and honest with their grading of their stock. So I knew what she'd thrown. She was 15. She'd already thrown a stakes winner. She was, I think, in foal with her 8th foal. So really wasn't on many people's lists. I loved Night of Thunder. I knew that Dabawi was going to leave a sire of size would be a sire of size at some stage, and I loved the family. She's from one of the best families in the Northern Hemisphere. Her grandmother's an Oaks winner. I was once told by a very prominent breeder in New Zealand, if you can't afford an Oaks winner, buy a daughter. If you can't buy a daughter, buy a granddaughter, and that's what I did. So she came out. She's a beautiful mare, like natured-wise. She left us a lovely foal. She left us Group 1 winner, and we've sold nearly, $750,000 out of her. So for a 40 grand purchase, I definitely want to let people know you can do it. It doesn't always have
yourself,
to be
as simple as it sounds.
the big bucks. Yeah.
Joe, who is the next sire you're excited about?
I had to think about this before we came in, and I've got to say it, for us, I think for Greg as well, would have to be Wootton Bassett. We've got the top 3 stallions in the country that we can all get into and be fairly certain of getting something in foal by 3 different stallions. I don't think there's any dominant sire line in the country. Actually, that's 4 stallions at the top end at the moment. And we need more stallions coming through. I think Wootton Bassett, like Written Tycoon, like Vinny, one other I had there, Street Boss maybe, all has come in off very low service fees. We need more blood here. He's got to a service fee off a low service fee, and I'm excited for him. Maybe don't like the service fee, but I think he's probably the one I'm waiting for at this stage.
And he obviously throws very good-looking sales stock.
We know. Yeah. Now.
Yeah, look, he's done it. I think all the Stallion Syndicate guys have had a go because that top-end range of where they're able to shop on proven horses is very small, and I just want them to do better so we have more choice faster.
I'm going to say a Home Affairs. And the reason I'm going to say a Home
hang on.
Affairs,
James is sponsored by Coolmore. So
No. Well, maybe. Here's the thing. Peter O'Brien said this himself recently. Every single Home Affairs that we've seen is the best foal of its dam. Now, that is a fact. He's getting great heads, great hindquarters, good actions. You should be after him as well, right? I mean, you did buy his mother, didn't you?
yes, we love him.
But I haven't for a long time seen a group of weanlings of that quality in paddocks everywhere, and he stamps them. And they've got all the attributes you ever look for. I am absolutely confident he is the next big thing.
Just on that as well, so you've got Damon who's done well out of it, James who picks it. You talk about Tell Your Mama that we sold. She's from that family and we sold her in foal to Home Affairs, breeding back to that family. So there's a lot of support. Fingers crossed.
Well, I'm going to plug Coolmore too, because I think St Mark's, and prior to this week, I was a big fan of him. I think his blood, what he did, he's one of the horses of old that win a Dewhurst and then a Classic, trains on at 3. I think his stock have been fantastically received. They've got such a lot of bone. I think they look tough. I'm very excited to see what he can do. I think there is a propensity to question shuttle stallions. I think we've had phenomenal success, and we've gone periods of time where there's been lack of success. Hopefully, the likes of sort of Two Darn Hot is resurgent in getting those shuttle stallions in more favour. But I definitely feel that he's a stallion after seeing his stock, and certainly the couple that we've had on the farm that I feel is very suited to do well here. So I'm hoping that he comes out and does it.
Damon, do you have a stallion?
In the unproven or
The new crop coming through.
First season
First
going
season.
to start, like up on the screen.
who's on the screen?
I'll read them out for you. We've got Cylinder, Militarised, Hawaii 5-0 and Lofty Strike.
Well, Cylinder Militarised is an unbelievable 3-time Group 1 winner. I think he's a sensational prospect, Two
Right,
Group
that's
1s at 2, a Group 1 at 3. He's very exciting. We saw Cylinder today. He's a gorgeous-looking sprinting sire. There's a great crop coming through this season, I think.
Okay. Mating a Broodmare, any questions?
I think personally it's a bit early to call done deal. At the moment, the stats are favoured in the way of the colts, but stallions have a way of evening themselves out over the years. Commands was sort of colt dominant early, and he evened himself out. Chaparral probably was, James. You'd know more about that than me. And the stakes winners even themselves out as well. So
They
I think
do. That doesn't necessarily help James if he breeds one and is trying to sell it. Yeah, a filly, and trying to. It's a bit like Autumn Sun Colts at the moment. He seems filly dominant, but it will even out. But when you're making your mating decisions, you have to take it into account, because you've got to send it into the sale ring next year or the year after.
But it wouldn't worry me going to Militarise that done deals a filly by a sire at the moment, wouldn't you?
That wouldn't worry me.
James, sorry, you might have answered this question. If you go and buy a first crop filly by Militarise, are you going to question the, sire line for sex bias?
No, I'm not going to say his sire had a sex bias, therefore he might. So personally, I wouldn't.
I think Super Seth is obviously off to a great start as well, and he might be a horse to sort of judge by. I'm going to run with this one. I would go, if you're buying at a lower dollar value, buy from families, as I said, that are being mated well outside of your power, and get that free ride on them. by the time your yearling sells or your second yearling sells, what else is going on in the family?
And try to breed the best physical sort that you can. Try to beat a racehorse. We go short term. We know we'll make money in the sale ring. However, it may not be the best horse for producing a racehorse.
If you're in the entry level, I'm not sure that you can make your broodmare. Like, I think you need, like Joe said, you need to be using other people to leverage the success of the family that would then hopefully go on.
But I would say yes, and don't breed for the sale ring if you want to make a broodmare. Breed for the racetrack, because the minute she's produced a good one, everything changes, and you've made your broodmare.
I disagree. If you have to survive, you have to sell something people will buy, and the market is so very clear about what it wants, and it is voracious. And if you just need to keep breathing and earning money, don't breed something people will not buy.
We're making a broodmare, not a new extension on your house.
You're a James Bester and Cornwall budget.
Winners make broodmares. You know, Hayasugi's dam might now be very valuable because she's won a Group 1 because she was a racehorse, not because she sold for a lot of money in the yearling sale ring or weanling sale ring.
Can you survive that long, Ziva?
Yeah, but that wasn't her question. Her question is, how do you make your broodmare?
I'd say plan your matings, the physical and the physical, because the most important thing is to produce the good-looking yearling in the sale ring that the trainers and buyers want to buy. You might have to explain that this nick works, but if the horse in front of you is an ordinary-looking horse, no one cares about the nicks. The trainers aren't that educated. So they just want the good-looking yearling, so breed the product that you think will look the best. And that's first season proven.
I think as we have more and more sales around us as salespeople, you don't have the opportunity to talk your market into why this horse is a good horse for them to look at on the parade ground. It needs to be something that people want to get out of the box. So don't swim against the tide if you have a smaller pool of money.
Are we ready to move on to the last segment, broodmare health and reproduction, everyone's favourite topic. Chris, you're going to star in this one. When you're examining a mare at a sale, hopefully in person, obviously, what are the red flags, Chris, that you would look out for that would tell you that the mare is going to be a difficult breeder, whether it's caslix, which is excessive scarring of the vulva, small ovaries, cysts, those type of things?
Obviously, when you're in a sale scenario, outside of the breeding certificate and what you can see, there isn't a great deal that you can do. I certainly, red flags for me, I've probably become more relaxed as I've got older. I used to be a little bit more strict on what I didn't let through, but certainly vulva confirmation for sure. I think probably the biggest thing I would look at is the history of the mare. There's so much information online. You can go to Racing Australia, or Australian Stud Book, sorry, to have a look at that breeding record, see when she slipped, did she get back in foal if she slipped, did it take her 2 cycles, 3 cycles? Did she switch stallions? Did she, foal a foal and then just not get covered that year? If it was early, why not? Did she, have a difficult birth? Have we got a cervical issue? Is she barren? Is she, has she had 5 foals on a bounce, and you're probably likely that she's going to, not have this next foal? I have a theory that they tend to get to 6 or 7 and they often take a year off. But it's not so much red flags as to the whole picture. I like to look at the history then, and if I've got a mare with a difficult conformation or bad conformation, but she's clearly doing a great job and getting in foal very early, I worry very little about it. Equally, if I've got a mare with a terrible vulval conformation or bad teats or bad feet, and I see that she's not had a foal for 2 or 3 years, they're the warning signs.
And just remember as well, when you're looking at mares, ask the question, is this mare on treatment for whatever reason? We're all busy at the sales. We might not be there when you particularly look at a mare, but you can ask, is this mare on TMPS? Is it on Regulate? Is it on anything? So just so you've got in your mind to budget for those costs going forward.
What is a common reason that a mare would abort or slip a foal?
I mean, there's
so many, I know, but-
multitude. I mean, I've read some of these sample questions. I think we could probably have a whole week of talks, which would be great. But I mean, around the world, ascending bacterial infection is the biggest cause of abortion, and certainly older mares are more prone to that. Mares with poor conformation behind, certainly mares that have had difficult births before, maybe cervical trauma. Everybody, I'm sure, is aware there's 3 main doors or restriction of access to the uterus. The first one is the vulva, the second is the vestibule, and the third one is the cervix. And if any one of those 3 things are broken, there is a great chance that you're going to get some bacteria sitting around the cervix, which is the main door to stopping your fetus from becoming infected. So that's the most important part. And so, yeah, that'll be the most common reason for abortion.
So I think if you're buying a mare and foal, you need to keep in mind potentially you need to insure the fetus that you're buying in the belly, unless the farm is underpinning it, but that's not standard, and I think you just need to potentially keep in mind you may need fetal insurance for any mare that you buy in foal.
And Joe, you touched on treatments, buying a mare that might already be on treatment. Are there processes you use like Regulate or Solprum to manage mares or older mares or mares with issues?
Not necessarily older mares. Plenty of older mares are perfectly fine. We have mares on the farm who are good producers, produce good foals for us every year, but are on monthly treatment. They may be on weekly treatment for Regulate TMPS. Chris could expand on this. It is just part of breeding mares regularly.
I think we've all been there where we've had mares that we're scared. Breeding is scary. Whether you're a $700,000 purchase in foal to a Zoo Star, or whether you're a 30 grand first mare in foal to a 15 grand sire, it's a scary business. You want that foal out as safely as possible, and I think there is a propensity to go for blanket treatments in a lot of our horses, which include antibiotics and Regulate, which is a synthetic progesterone, anti-inflammatories, and we've all done it, we've all been there. I think there is a disclaimer here that overuse of these treatments can actually cause more problems than you're actually going to save. Antibiotic resistance in Australia is rife, and it will become a big problem if we keep using them in the way that we are doing. I'm as guilty as anyone, so I'm not here preaching. You've got an expensive mare and you just try and do everything you can to keep them in foal, but it is absolutely imperative that we are really prudent with the treatments that we're putting these horses on. Regulate, I've had plenty of mares that have been on Regulate for a couple of seasons that actually end up struggling to cycle post coming off Regulate and foaling. I mean, it's not just a band-aid and it will be fine. There are consequences to everything that we do, so I do think we just have to be very specific with what we're trying to treat. There are ways in which we can diagnose mares with difficult breeding histories and target the treatments that we need to for those specific horses, but I would urge to come away from sort of blanket treatments. I think that's been a thing that has happened regularly for decades now, and it is certainly lots of studs are becoming wise that that's not the right thing to be doing.
I think, Chris, as well, scanning has improved. So we're scanning placentas, we're scanning umbilicals, we're checking for blood flow, we're checking for thickness of placentas. We're doing a whole lot of things during a pregnancy that maybe weren't done 10 years ago. So trying to reduce treatment and then only apply it as required. Agreed?
Yeah, definitely. There is a propensity, and I know this is probably a subject area that a lot of stud masters are now discussing quite regularly with their clients. It came up in a conversation with James and I earlier today, is just how regularly and how extensively we should be scanning our mares. Now, I'm a pretty relaxed vet when it comes to my mares, and personally it isn't without risk putting a hand in a mare every month. I know to the stud farm and the breeder it's an extra cost. I certainly would be prudent with the horses that I would be doing it with. I think some mares, I've had the odd mare that have come through the crush and haven't enjoyed the experience in later term, and I think that is something that I'm wary of. But certainly if there's mares that you are at all concerned about regular fetal scanning, and I know we've got vets in the audience, is one of the things that we can do to really tailor the treatment, and I think it's saved numerous amounts of foals. Now there's a statistic that really mares will have 2 out of every 3 foals. So every third you are losing the ability to make money out of a product that we spend a lot of money on. So anything we can do really to target treatment to get 3 out of 3 or a higher foaling rate from our mares, I think is very important.
I just want to toss one political hand grenade in here that breeders may not thank me for, but I think it's important if you're thinking of buying a mare in foal, knowing that you won't get a free return if she slips, to go to the stud farm that of the sire and say, look, I'm buying this, it's in foal to whatever, will you honor the foal, free return?
Bit of insurance.
The free return, which is difficult because, somebody's already paid it and that's built in when you buy the mare. But nonetheless, if you can go to the breeders and say to them, I'm buying this mare in foal to Zoostar, will you stand over it? And if it slips, can I have a free return? That's something not everybody does and should do.
Does it work? People give you the
occasionally, very much so, yes. Right. A lot of farms would say, for sure, we want to keep you in business, and they have received their service fee. So a lot of them will honor it.
I think some of that comes down to relationships as well, and the people that are buying the horse for you, or the farm that the horse is going to. If you're someone they don't know and you're taking it home to their back paddock, no. Especially if it's an expensive pregnancy, why? There's no obligation for the farm, and you have to appreciate their side of it as well when they only have so many to sell each year.
Stallion fertility, when discussing matings, how important, again, like we hear about, is it true that the busier the stallion, the more it may struggle with its fertility? And we're using older examples, obviously.
Never worried James.
No. Equine only.
I didn't get them all in foal. Chris is the best man to answer that.
Anyone?
Look, I think this is a subject area that we talk about often. Stallions are getting busier and busier. There's been studies to suggest, certainly earlier on, that busier stallions are actually more fertile. And now the reason why no one really knows, some stallions, I did a decade of working with stallions in Newmarket, and certainly some stallions, actually, the more regularly they cover, the better their fertility, for sure. I think there is a bit of a myth that if you're the 4th cover of the day, you're not going to get the amount that everybody else gets. But to be honest, when we did stats at Jemma, the 3rd and 4th covers of the day were the most fertile. Reason being is the mare's usually closer to ovulation, and as a consequence, they get in foal. Most mares ovulate overnight. They've probably been given an ovulating hormone the day before, and as a consequence, they're closer. The myth about, should I go to a busy stallion? There's been a recent study within the last 10 years that if there is a drop of fertility, it's marginal, probably 6% at max. But
6%, did you say?
Yeah, so that may seem like a lot if you're one of the 6, but I think ultimately the theory for busier stallions being more successful might well be because the mares are having to be teed up closer anyway in order to get the spot that you want for the stallion.
I think we play a little game at Easter and go, ooh, what's your favourite stallion coming up that you're going to send your mares to this year? And I think Greg and I generally go, the one that's frickin' going to get it in foal. And so that comes down to space at the farm, fertility of the stallion. And if we're talking first season to last season, I know on our farm, it probably doesn't matter, but most fertile 2 stallions last year were Animo and Schnitzel for us at completely different ends of the spectrum.
This is a big thing, this overbooking of stallions. I think every broodmare owner has a problem with this. These farms, I'm not going to make myself popular saying this, but these stallion farms are overbooking their stallions, and you try and get your mare in on the day, and you're sitting back in the queue and sucking the hind teat. So I don't know how we address that, but...
I think by reducing the price the farms have to pay for these horses off the track, they're paying these massive numbers, so they need to get as many foals as they can that first season. So it's a catch-22. So look for space.
Absolutely. Just moving on to nutrition, how important is that with a pregnant mare or a lactating mare and even a dry mare coming in to get ready for cover?
Look, I think we're in a bit of a luxurious space. We only have sort of 60 resident mares on farm, so we can mob them in individually. Individual mobs, depending on the mare. A mare like myself, I don't need too much. But if you look at your mares, you know what they need, so you mob accordingly. We don't want big, fat, gross mares that are having diabetic sort of pregnancies and producing OCDs. So you need to be able to mob them to what they need. So some mares need more and a bit of a push, others need a pullback. And I think that comes down to safe foalings and good x-rays going forward.
I think consistent growth patterns is probably the most important thing that any of us should be looking at in all of our stock. No massive swings in weight gains in any of our stock. That's going to be where you're going to end up with your most problems, both from fertility through to foaling through to OCDs at yearling sows. So we're very lucky. We have an independent company, which I know lots of people utilise independent companies and nutritionists, and I think they add such a great value. We can't all be masters of our trades. We're looking at very expensive horses, and I think the fact that we've got people that dedicate their entire life to doing it, I would implore you, there's so much information online with regard to feeding your horses, far more intelligent people than I can ever, pretend to know about nutrition, and but certainly it's out there, and it is very, very important, I think, with the level of investment that we're all making, that we don't forget nutrition. It's probably the most important thing.
We're at the penultimate question. Photo to go up at the moment here. We've seen it on social media. I think the photo of I Wish I Win as a young horse. Managing mares post-foaling obviously can be difficult. This is one of the examples, and the mare would need to be locked up for a period of time. How do you help a mare get back and foal when it's in one of these situations where it hasn't been straightforward and it's not just back into the paddock?
Interesting. I think Mark always says that we didn't do anything with this horse, but I can remember doing a great deal of things with this horse. But look, this horse was very rarely in a box, to be honest. I'm not a big fan of locking up horses. I think locking up horses is one of the worst things you can do. Obviously, there's times where we can't avoid that, and certainly we have to maintain nutrition. I think for short periods of time, I don't have any problems. Usually, mares sort themselves out. The age group where I'm more worried would be an older foal, probably at near the age that this foal is now, a couple of months old, where probably starting to tuck into mum's food, is going to be getting a little bit more energy than what you're expecting he is getting, and before you know it, you've got a big cyst in the stifle, and it's not the bent leg that you're worried about anymore. It's the fact you can't sell him. This horse didn't have a cyst; he just didn't sell because of this wonky leg, and ended up winning $10 million. So it's
did it not improve from that to yearling time?
Yeah, I remember we came back from the yearling sale after selling a $1.4 million full brother to this. The highest price that we'd ever sold at the yearling sale. Everyone was elated, and we looked sidewards in the yearling, runs, and there was his full brother with his legs still on sidewards, and it was a little bit sobering. But it took probably till he was about 3, I would say, until it was, it was acceptable. But he still, if you see him, he does walk with a little bit of a lateral footfall first, and then to medially, and he is a little bit in at the knee, but. Again, I mean, it adds to another topic that we'll discuss at some stage in the future is when we're breeding and trying to breed out conformational forts. This particular market is there's a lot of angular limb deformities that we're breeding into some of these horses, and it's unfortunate just because most of the fast horses have those as a genetic trend. The least we can do with these horses is usually the better, but unfortunately we have to get them to a sellable stage that we can actually promote them. This horse is one of the best horses that Mark's ever produced, and we did, other than there was nothing invasive that we did with this horse. I think if it was here, we probably would have screwed the knee, would have screwed the fetlock, and we would have probably altered a gait of a horse that naturally learnt to deal with a leg that wasn't as straight as everybody else's, and has ultimately ended up being the best horse of his generation for Waikato. So.
And I think one of those things is the difference in countries. So this was Waikato bred, can go out in a small yard on good grass, and being raised here, different situation. And if it was a client's horse in Australia, say at Ridgemont, and it came out like that, you're probably going to be doing something more progressive than all that beautiful chittick money just going, chuck it in that small yard and we'll see how it pulls up. So I think if you're talking about how are we managing that, and I know you and I have had this discussion at the farm, if you're needing to lock something up for a bit of time, we want it in a box where it's getting some sunlight on it because we want it to cycle. We want that mare cycling. We don't want it on Australian hard ground where potentially we're aggravating it that we wouldn't have in New Zealand. And we're trying to keep the mare happy. You know, she's locked up, as you were talking earlier about mares who get a bit wound up. We don't want her injuring it. You're keeping the mare calm, happy, with not too many aggravations around her. Good girlfriends.
We might bring it to a close, but if anyone has any questions for this topic, which is broodmare health and reproduction.
In terms of older mares, or not necessarily older mares, but mares with a bad breeding record, especially maybe if they are young mares and they've missed a couple of times or they've slipped, obviously that's a huge negative and it's going to impact their value significantly. But from your perspective or from the panel's perspective as buyers, obviously there's opportunity there. How do you, or what are obviously there are questions you ask, but are there specific scenarios you're prepared to forgive when a mare has slipped or missed a number of times in such an early age in her career as well?
The one that I probably would say is no is if she's had a dystocia. If she's had cervical trauma and that's the reason why she's not conceiving, there's a very slim chance that you're going to get that mare back in foal. It's not impossible, but there's only so much drugs can do. Regumate is one of the drugs that we can use. In the olden days, they used to do what's called cervical cyclage, and they'd actually suture the cervix shut, which is, you know, thankfully totally gone out of fashion. That would be a complete no-no for me. If there was a mare with maybe fluid issues or cystic, you know, cysts in their uterus, those are things we can actually do things about. Again, I'm pretty relaxed with most things. You just need to work out what it is that's causing her. And that sounds like it should be an easy thing to do. And occasionally we end up just throwing the kitchen sink at these horses and something will work. We don't really know why. Certainly our access to uterine swabs, biopsies, we can scope them. If we've got cysts, we can remove the cysts. If we've got fluid, we've got to work out whether she's overproducing the fluid or she's failing to get rid of the fluid. If we've got a tight cervix because she's 7 or 8 foal, we can put treatment on her cervix to relax her cervix. If she's not cycling, we can give her treatments. If we think she's got blocked oviducts, we can give her treatments. So there are a myriad of reasons why a mare might not conceive. Trying to work them out is probably the hardest, but there is a lot of things that we can do now, and it is risky. I've brought a couple of mares where we have managed to get them in foal where other people haven't, and we've hit a bit of a home run. And then I've also bought mares where the ego kicks in, and I think, God, I can do better than the last person, and I've not managed to get it or maintain her pregnancy. So I do think it's there's no outright no's outside of cervical lesion. But certainly that, yeah.
I think that ducks thing we've had good luck with, your farm and us, and
That comes down to research as well. If you've got a mare in this catalogue, there's missed, slipped, missed, you've got to dig deep and find out.
Who did she go to? What stallion, and what was his fertility as well?
And you know what, to be honest, most studs now are very open with their comms on what these mares have had. Like, often some of these mares that haven't been bred for or been successfully bred for 2 or 3 years, they know the value of the mare is pretty low, and if someone's going to have a good turn and manage to get them in foal, most of the time they're pretty willing to let you know the history. And most of the vets have good personal relationships between each other and can help, where needed. So it's definitely not a no-no to buy a mare with a bad breeding history, but you definitely got to take into account that there's a high chance that you're probably not, you might end up with a mare not in foal.
Guys, I think if you're unsure and there's been some problems that's presented on the pedigree page, go and look the person that's selling the horse in the eye, and if you're not confident in doing it, ask an agent or a vet or a representative, someone with a bit more experience, what has been the issues with this. There clearly is, and it is the farm's obligation to explain the issues clearly to you. And then you can go back to your vet and form a plan, or your vet can advise you, maybe give this one a miss. But for God's sake, please look them in the eye, ask them the question.
And I think, look, John Cameron spoke to us about that many, many years ago, and he said, would you sell this mare to a friend? And ask the farm if there is a dodgy breeding history there. They have to declare what you ask them. So be specific about what you ask. And it might be something you can overcome. It might have been a stallion with poor fertility. It might have been bad luck for the mare in a year. And Greg and I have been down this road and made money out of mares with poor breeding history. But just ask the question.
I think we've got to remember too, and it's an important thing for some of the stallion studs, that over 60% of the chance that your mare's not conceiving is down to the mare. It's not down to the stallion. So look harder and look deeper. Don't just say, oh, it's because the stallion can't get my mare in foal. It is usually 2 out of 3 times it's going to be the fact that your mare's got an issue.
Or it might have just been her year to not get in foal.
You're obviously all very successful and extremely good at what you do now, but individually, what was your first little win you had when you were first starting out and getting into it?
What was your first win?
I can understand the Kiwi accent, so I'll run with this. Thank you, Oscar. What was your first little win? I'm going to go with that mare of ours, Mistral, the Volksrad mare at 21,000, who went on to win multiple group races and was later sold for 460,000 many, many years ago now. So I don't know what that would be now. Do your homework on those families and take the upside if you can.
Mine wasn't particularly successful. I bought a mare for my first mare for 5,500 guineas. She was called Vienna View. Everyone called her 10-2 because that's how badly turned out she was. And I bred her to a stallion. We made about £38,000, which in that stage was quite a bit of money and was successful. But it wasn't the money. Her sibling then went on to be champion stayer in Hong Kong, and it just was my first mare where it vindicated that I had picked the right horse, and no luck involved.
My advice to the young people here would be to get a ticket in the lottery, because buy a share in something and try. Because myself and my great mate Paul Willits bought a $10,000 weanling in a terrible sale in New Zealand one year to try to trade, and he won a race and he failed the vet. Anyway, that was great because he then won 2 Group 1s, but we had a ticket in the lottery. So you got to have a ticket in the lottery. So you buy something.
And I think on that note, buddy up. If you're a young person or a small breeder having a go, buddy up with people and don't buy 1, take 25% in 4.
Just to prig test 7 days out from the sale, I bought a mare a couple of years ago off a vendor, and the night the mare got home, she aborted. Obviously, she's preg tested 7 days of the sale. Questions for Chris, but should we be signing off that these mares don't have placentitis at 7 days?
I think, look, certainly I've had a lot of mares that under my care that have been purchased at sale, and I can't honestly say that I think many of them have aborted post being at a sale. There is some data to suggest that the cortisol spike induced by stress can induce early pregnancy or early parturition. I am a little bit concerned that we may overread or overinterpret the scan, and I think that leaves the door a little bit open. It's a very hard one. Like we were sort of talking about it a bit earlier of whether that is something that should be included in a pregnancy cert before the sale, what their placenta looks like. It's a tough one. I don't know if there's a right answer. I personally don't know that I would see as common a link between the two. I think it's an unfortunate situation. I don't know if there's a right answer to that question, I'm afraid.
Question down
Yeah, in saying that, that's a reply to Dave. They're standing over yearlings now, post-sale, so why can they not stand over some of these pregnancies off these mares of higher value or even across the board?
Who wants that one?
Yes, well, as I said earlier, I think we should put pressure on the stallion farms to stand over the pregnancies. After all, they are getting the service fee. The minute
It is
the horse
14
is
days
sold.
for yearlings, so what do you think is appropriate for a pregnancy?
Well, I think, is it asking for your free return before you buy the mare and giving yourself that insurance?
Yes,
knowing
indeed. That gives you the insurance right away. So try and secure that free return, whatever you do. After that, these things are acts of God. But if you buy at Inglis, that's a month before or 2 months before Magic Millions, so there's less of a chance.
Just a question, you people up there got many, many years of breeding racehorse experience. Do you think it's a real thing that some mares just won't get in foal to a particular stallion?
I do. Yep, for sure.
Me too.
Well, Tyrell had a mare in the sale. Pinocchio went 3 times to Animo, missed, and one covered a I'm Invincible, bang. So some people are compatible and some people aren't.
I think I can't quote Peter because I'm pretty sure Peter O'Brien is a believer of this. Vermeer's had 2 goes switch, and I think that's a very good piece of advice. Like, genetically, there might be some incompatibility, or they might be getting pregnant but losing before 16 days. So we don't know. There's a lot that goes on in that first 5 or 6 days of when the fertilized ovum comes out of it, or embryo comes out of a fallopian tube. So I would say definitely there is a chance that 2 stallions won't nick and you switch and you hit the bingo straight away.
I kind of think it's witchcraft. I have no idea why, but yeah, quit.
And thank you to the panellists for joining us tonight. It was very insightful.
Thank you for your time.